right. Um, Pardon me. All right. It is 6:01 p.m. I'm going to get started. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for showing up. My name is Dan Erdman. I am the senior video archivist here at MediaBurn Archive, which is a nonprofit video archive here in Chicago. I am at the MediaBurn headquarters right now, MediaBurn Studios. You see some of our collection over my shoulder. I'd just like to tell a little bit about us. MediaBurn collects, preserves, and distributes documentary and experimental video produced by artists, activists, and community groups. Our mission is to create positive social change by amplifying underheard voices, both in contemporary dialogue and in the historical record. And this event that you're attending, that I'm glad you showed up for, is part of an ongoing free series called Virtual Talks with Video Activists, which creates conversations around media production. Now, these occur every 2 weeks, approximately every 2 weeks, on Thursday nights. And if you enjoy this event, please keep on tuning in. We're very glad you're here. Our next one, by the way, or our next fully scheduled one, takes place on October 26th with video maker Nick DiMartino, whose tapes I just received today. They're in a box right here, just off screen. Very quickly, just some sort of house rules. If you could all mute yourselves preemptively, I would appreciate it. There'll be time for questions and answers later on in the session, and at that point you can unmute yourself and it'll be fine. But for now, just because people often forget, and then they'll start doing some noisy thing and nobody knows what's going on. If you could just hit the little red microphone. Oh, this session is being recorded. It's being recorded right now. And just so you know, you'll if your camera is on, you will possibly be a part of that recording. But also this being recorded now and will be made available to watch online at our site, mediaburn.org, mediaburn.org. In a couple of days after the event, we usually have it up. So if you like it so much you want to see it again, that will be an option. And also, I want to mention that you have the option to set up closed captions for this session if you wish to do so. Just as a reminder, and for those of you who've never done this before, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, if you wiggle your cursor around on the screen, you see where it says, in the lower right-hand corner, pardon me, it says more, and it has 3 little dots. Click on that, and you'll see a bunch of options. Among those will be for captions. Click on captions, and English captions should start showing up shortly thereafter. Right. I think that's all I have to say about that. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, to today's talk, which is about the work of video preservation. And it's going to be hosted by myself, Dan Erdman, and my co-host, our guest, Nilsson from Nilsson Carroll, that is, he has the last name, Nilsson Carroll from Visual Studies Workshop in upstate New York. And typically with these events, it's more of a more traditional screening event, right? Where a video maker will show up, screen some of their old work or sometimes work in progress, and we'll show it for about a half hour or 25 minutes, and then they'll discuss it for a bit and we'll ask questions, so on and so forth. This is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be a little bit different because the videos you're about to see are not the typical kind of thing that MediaBurn is known for preserving or showing. These are videos made by myself and by Nilsson over the past couple of days, the past couple hours, in my case, that just sort of want to highlight the particular work that we do to preserve video. I think that a lot of times archivists in the AV field, in video and also film sometimes, we can, if we're not careful, can cultivate a sense of, that what we do is sorcery kind of thing. That it's really just a way to make us seem smarter than we actually are, to kind of keep our professional secrets secret, if you will. But I really don't think that serves anybody well. It maybe makes us look good, but I don't think it serves the cause of video preservation And I just kind of don't like to operate that way. So, and I also, we find it's a topic that people are interested in. Obviously, we've got 38 people here who are interested in it. So we seek to satisfy that curiosity. Why not? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I don't know. And I'll go to you, Nilsson. Do you have anything to say about the broader topic? To introduce yourself and say
Yeah,
who you are and what you do.
I'll quickly introduce myself. Hello, thank you all for being here. My name is Nelson Carroll. I'm the Assistant Curator and Preservation Specialist here at VSW, where I currently am. Read VSW's mission for folks that aren't familiar with the organization. VSW nurtures experimental and expansive approaches to photography and the media arts, and builds community among artists and the public through exhibitions, publications, and residencies. So we have an artist residency program. I manage the media transfer lab here. That's where the current room that I am in. You can see I've got a bunch of media transfer equipment behind me. I manage the media transfer lab. I lead workshops. I do a lot of graphic design. I also help out with the programs and exhibitions here. I'm also an artist. I'm a video artist, also a video game artist, and I work sort of at the intersection of play and queer theory in games. Yeah, it's a little bit about me. What do we want to jump into the first video, or do you want to introduce your video, Dan?
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. Yes, this first video is by me. Might as well go right into it. And it's yeah, just we just decided to sort of take this piece by piece to sort of have a through line of explaining specifically what happens to video. We here at MediaBurn, we have our own collection, as you can see, but we also digitize video for clients as well, in all sorts of scales, just home movies and corporate collections and library and archival collections and all sorts of things. And we, Nilsson and myself, just wanted to sort of go through like what happens when we decide to preserve a video. What are the steps there from like receiving the actual physical tape to then managing its digital surrogate in the ether. And this very first video, which is the one that I shot, the other two will be by Nilsson, just goes through from that very first step one, both explaining what it is about the videotape medium that is unique, and then what actually we do to prepare it for its little adventure on the road to preservation. So I don't know. With that in mind, I think we've said enough, sort of set the table enough, don't you? All right, Max, roll the first video. Start with a roll of Scotch tape, a piece of rusty metal. I'll use this film can that's been sitting in my garage, and a little bit of steel wool. Pull out a long strip of tape and place it before you on the table, sticky side up. Grab your rusty metal and your steel wool and hold them over the tape. And start buffing the rusty part of the metal so that little flakes of rust fall onto the tape. Keep going until it's covered by the tiny metallic dust. What you'll have at the end is a long plastic strip covered by thousands of tiny metallic particles, all held together with glue. What you'll have is, essentially, the same thing as a strip of videotape. Videotape comes in a variety of different formats, as you see here, but what they all have in common is that they all carry their information electronically. What's on the tape is a series of electrical charges which are read by a playback deck and then reconverted back into human legible sound and image. Millions of hours of these images were created on videotape between the 60s and the 2000s. And what we in the preservation field aim to do is to save as many of them as possible. Film preservationists try to save their images by saving the actual medium. There are many thousands of film prints held in archives like the Library of Congress, or the Museum of Modern Art, or the George Eastman House, or my pantry. A film print, if looked after properly, could be perfectly viewable for centuries, but unfortunately, that's not the case with videotape. Unlike film, videotape is not very physically robust at all, and is subject to all kinds of decay and damage that can't be avoided, even with proper handling and storage. What's more, none of the companies that used to manufacture playback decks do so anymore. In order to play a tape, you need to find a working deck. If your deck breaks, you need to fix it, probably using some particular type of gear or screw or belt that hasn't been manufactured for 35 years. If you can't fix your deck, you can't play your tape, and if you can't play your tape, you may as well not even have it at all. To preserve material on videotape, then, you must digitize it. This is labor-intensive, expensive, and often very boring, but it must be done. Of course, digitization is more than just the reformatting process. All the stuff you do from the point of acquisition onward is part of the work of preparing the tape to be reformatted. Of course, there's other stuff you have to do to get to that point, in terms of funding, or designing dependable workflows, and all the other stuff that ideally just sort of functions in the background once you get it going, but which is essential to maintaining daily operations. But for now, I'll concentrate on the hands-on activity. So you drop your collection off with us. This could be a donation to our archive, or a parcel of tapes to be transferred on a commercial basis. It could be several boxes consisting of hundreds of tapes, or just a bag with a few cassettes. The first task for an archival collection, of any kind, whether it's tapes, documents, or anything else, is to determine what you have and to make a record of that. That means creating an inventory. We always start by making note of the formats contained in the collection, and then we record any annotations written on either the cassette or reel or housing of the tape. Additionally, we assign a unique ID number to each tape, and then affix that to the tape so that we have a solid association between the physical item and the data we've collected about it. Having done this, we then inspect each tape to assess its physical condition. Tapes tend to break down in the same handful of ways, so we usually do a quick check for the obvious signs. We look for physical damage, such as creases or tears in the tape. If the tape is damaged, there's unfortunately not much that can be done, and the image and sound playback will likely be compromised as a result. The problem with a reel or cassette is much easier to fix, as the tape can usually be simply transplanted and put into another shell. We've got boxes of leftover garbage tapes here that we often use for just that purpose. Though of course, it's important to remember to retain the original damaged cassette for the record. Tapes often get moldy, especially if they've been stored somewhere hot and humid. This can sometimes look like white powder on the tape pack, or sometimes a kind of fuzz. You don't want to play a moldy tape on any deck, as it's a great way to spread the infestation to all the other tapes you play afterward. So the mold must be cleaned. This is a hassle, as it usually requires specialized equipment. We have access to some tape cleaning machines, but only for certain formats. In this case, half-inch open reel. At this point, we usually smell the tape. This is to detect the presence of what is colloquially called sticky shed syndrome. This is an irritatingly common phenomenon in which the glue that holds the metallic particles begins to deteriorate after absorbing ambient moisture from the air. An affected tape will often smell waxy, like a box of crayons. When this occurs, the tape becomes sticky to the touch and can no longer move through the playback deck at the right rate, and sometimes it'll even stop dead. And will often lose some amount of the metallic particles which carry the signal, in the worst case, resulting in permanent loss of sound and image. Luckily, there's a solution for a stinky, sticky tape, which is to bake it. This is not a euphemism. It is common practice to bake sticky tapes to try to reduce the amount of moisture that has been absorbed. We tend to bake ours at 130 degrees for about a day or two. It doesn't solve the problem every time. Some tapes are simply too far gone to bring back, but I'd say that we see an improvement in about 70% of them. At this point, we have a basic handle on what the tapes are, both as physical items and intellectual entities, and we've fully prepared them for the actual digitizing process. I'll now leave Nilsson to explain exactly how that works. I will in fact leave Nilsson to do that in just a couple minutes with his video, but that's a sort of quick view of the basic workflow that we have here at MediaBurn. Nilsson, is that about the same over at VSW? Similar type of thing?
Yeah, that was, I just want to commend you. That was a great video. I especially liked the metaphor of the tape with the rust.
Yes.
I had never seen that before, and I thought that's just such a like great explanation of like, yeah, what the tape material actually is.
Oh.
It's
Well, thank you. I
if
stole
you
that
don't,
from somebody. But, yeah.
okay. As if you don't know like what's on it, like it's so different from film. Like you can't see the pictures or the audio on it. It's just this like sort of like black box format. I thought that was a really nice explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely our workflows are very similar. You end up with a box of tapes, and who knows what kind of format and who knows what kind of condition. Um, Catalog all of that. Get all the sort of visual information that you can get off of the tape. Check for mold, smelling the tapes like at a safe distance.
Yeah, you shouldn't do it the way that don't put your face right. For those
Yeah,
of you at home, yeah.
I like the first person point of view you had when
Yeah.
you smelled the tape. That was nice.
Yeah, I don't normally do it all with one hand either.
Yeah.
I usually, both working in concert. So,
And yeah, your cleaning device for the 1/2 inch was really interesting. I hadn't seen that. Could you talk a bit about that?
that's a device that we actually borrowed from our friends at Video Data Bank because we're right now in the midst of a big project to digitize that very format. Which I have right here. The 1/2 inch open reel format, which I have one right here to show. Yes, I tried to show off all the different formats that we can do. Most people who remember consumer video probably remember various cassette-based formats. But this is one of the very first, that was available to consumers. You can see it comes up right here. And these were often used, with the Sony Portapack, which was the first video camera that one could potentially carry around. It was still pretty heavy by today's standards, but at the time it was seen as it's just revolutionary new piece of technology. And throughout the late 60s and into the 70s, it was I'd say along with 3/4 inch later, the main format for independent video production. And yes, and they get very moldy sometimes and just dirty and grimy because they're 50 years old. And yeah, so when we got into this project, the folks at VDB graciously offered to share some of their equipment with us because they've got a lot of that format as well. And among that was that cleaning machine. That's the only cleaning machine we have. You guys, Nilsson, said you've got. Was it you were telling me you have got one for other formats?
No, not at all.
Who the heck was I talking to?
I hand clean everything. So I have something, a sort of similar setup to what we saw in your video, but I do it by hand.
Really?
So it's a reel-to-reel machine, and I hold it with the cleaning cloth, and I let the tape run back and forth, and I can clean it.
Oh wow. Did you build that from like parts of old decks or?
It's exactly an old deck. That still runs fine mechanically.
Yeah. Wow. See that's the thing. You have to be resourceful in this sort of endeavor because, there's not, there's no decks that are made anymore, and you have to like modify from old ones and try to sort of jerry rig something. And I don't know, I don't know, was that something that, have you always been kind of mechanically inclined in that way? And is that what kind of attracted you to this field?
Not really.
Okay.
That's actually something that I really had like every day I'm learning something new
Mm.
about how it works and how the machines work. Something that I do actually really enjoy is taking apart the tapes and putting them
Mhm.
back together. Like that's something that I'm good at and like can, do very carefully.
Right.
I had a lot of experience. Um, you know, I deal a lot with video games. I've always dealt with
Okay.
video games, and so video games are very different than tape, obviously. But
Mhm.
they're also another thing that you have to like open and clean. And
Really?
so
Okay.
as a teenager, yeah, I was opening video game cartridges and cleaning them with
Mm.
chamois swabs and
Mhm.
99% alcohol.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Wow.
it's that sort of love of opening and tinkering and
Okay.
cleaning to get something working. I've been doing
Yeah.
that my whole life.
Huh. Was that do you think sort of your entry point into this field broadly?
It definitely, yeah, I think it always felt similar, and
Right.
yeah, games and tapes operate very differently, but
Mhm.
they're sort of similar in some ways too.
Dan and
Yes.
Nilsson, I think we have a hand raised.
Oh yeah, I was going to get to that. I'm actually for HWP. Thank you for your question. But we are actually going to leave Q&A to
To
the
the end.
end of the period.
Got it.
Um, so we will address your question, but just in a bit. And what we're going to do right now is speaking of cleaning machines and cleaning decks, I think now is a good time to seek into Nilsson's first video, where he demonstrates exactly what is something that we both, I think, spend a lot of our time doing, and that is a sort of cornerstone activity for getting any kind of image and sound off of the tapes, which is deck maintenance, deck cleaning, which we're gonna see right now. Max, roll it.
All right, today we're going to be cleaning two decks. The first one is this Sony AV3650. It is a black and white half-inch deck. It's one of my favorite decks. And I clean it before and after we run any tape through it. I'm going to be using my favorite chamois swabs with 99% alcohol. We're gonna just go along the tape path here, around the head drum. We'll look at that closer in a second. And then just around the rest of the tape path. To making sure to avoid the rubber roller here. You don't want to get alcohol on that. Alright, so I've got a little bit of alcohol on my chamois swab here. And I'm going to start with the first film guide. A lot of tape buildup happens here, probably more than all the other tape guides. I can get on, you'll sort of see this black buildup. You can see I actually did this earlier with the same swab, and there's a little bit of residue on there. I'm going to go through and just make sure that I hit all the points of the rest of these tape guides, making sure that I get sort of these ledges here. These tape guides spin, so just sort of getting all of the different edges of them. I can see there's a little bit of buildup at the top here. You can see it's kind of coming off. I do clean these, I forget if I already said, before and after every tape, so the deck's pretty clean, but so yeah, there's a lot of buildup on there. Then this tape guide here, I'm just gonna go there. And then the head's the most important parts. I'm actually going to change to another part of the chamois swab, so a totally clean part right here. It's where the tape head is. It's one of two on this deck. And we're just going to, real careful with the heads, go along this. Keeping my fingers pretty close to the end here so I can really feel what's going on. You don't want anything to snag. So you never want to use like a cotton swab would be pretty bad on the heads. So you're gonna get, the cotton will start to come off and it'll get stuck to the heads. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos and they're like, oh yeah, clean the video heads with cotton swabs, and that's not what you want to do. Again, this is pretty clean. I just cleaned this deck, and so we're gonna spin around. Also, it's worth noting that, zoom out a little bit. Yeah, the entire tape path here around, around the head also needs to be cleaned. Sort of being mindful of where the heads are, but just making sure that this is clear. This sort of ledge is clear. These little ledges are clear of any tape residue that might have come off. Even if you clean your tapes, which we do, as you run them, the decks get dirty. That's part of it. So we're gonna come around here. Cool. So you can see right here is where that other head is. So I'm actually gonna get a little more alcohol. Do it like this. Left to right, never up and down. That's putting the heads at risk. It's the most sensitive part of this cleaning process, making sure our heads are clean. And again, watching out for this ledge along the head drum. It'll kind of pick up a little bit of that tape residue, and then going along the rest of the tape guides, making sure they're nice and clean. And then again, watching out for the rubber roller when we clean the last tape guide in the capstan. We don't want to get alcohol on the rubber. It'll start to degrade the rubber, or the rubber's always kind of degrading, so it'll speed up the degradation of the rubber, which we don't want. And so, again, avoiding the rubber but cleaning the guide. Cool. And that should be it for this deck.
All right. That is an accurate depiction of a process that I know very well. Nilsson, how often do you clean your decks?
I usually do it, before and after every tape. Usually after the tape is when you'll kind of get the residue off, and then before, just like a double check. But it's usually pretty clean. But yeah, all the time, basically, and not just, the 1/2-inch deck is sort of one of the easiest decks to clean in a lot of ways. The heads are a lot bigger, sort of a lot more robust. As you sort of go through the formats in time, everything gets smaller, more complicated. The heads get tinier and tinier and tinier, and more fragile. So the 1/2-inch deck is actually like the easiest one to clean, and everything's sort of just like out in the open for you to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. You get those later ones, like high 8s and stuff like that, and it's just like you need to like bring in a small child or somebody with like very tiny fingers to get in and do it or something. I think it's an important thing to point out, because it just shows how fragile the medium is, because the reason that we're constantly having to clean our decks is that very often the tape will be flying apart. Like I talked a little bit in my video about how sometimes your binder is going off, and but it's just that fragile of a medium that this sort of constant everyday kind of hands-on maintenance is something that you really kind of can't go without. You know, every once in a while I think, oh, I can play 2 tapes in a row, that'll be fine. And it's almost like every time I consciously think that, I wind up like getting a head clog, because what'll happen is you know, bits of tape will get stuck in the head on the magnets that actually read the tape back and supposed to bring the image. And when it does that, when you get that clog, it can't do that. And so you get a bad picture, you get dropouts, you get interference all over it. It's yeah, it's one hassle after another. But yeah, do you what kind of other maintenance do you do on decks?
Cleaning is the main one. Occasionally a belt will need to be changed, or something might need to be lubricated. Although that's not an everyday thing. That's usually
Right.
like if you get a new deck, for instance, you know, all the belts might need to be changed. Something might need to be lubricated. You know, it's usually not an electrical problem. Like the decks don't usually have an electrical problem, but sometimes they do. And then like figuring out where the electrical problem is, maybe, you know, a cap blew up, you know,
Yeah,
under
yeah,
something, and that's like a whole other, you know,
yeah.
problem.
I find I over the years as I've done this, I've gotten to be pretty decent at if there's a mechanical problem, I can figure out, I feel like most of those. Like again, it's either like it's usually it's some rubber part that you just need to replace. It's you need to lube stuff up, or in worst case scenario, it'll be some part that just breaks that ideally you can just take, because I'm sure, you know, we have, I'd say probably, I don't know, I don't want to put out a number, but like a significant portion of the decks that we have are just broken beyond any hope, and we just keep them around for parts. So like, you know, a similar model goes bad, it's like, oh, okay, we could just take this arm out and put it in here, or this ring or whatever. And I can do most of that. It's electronics repairs where I have a lot to learn. I don't know, do you do electronics repair at all, or?
I try not to.
Yeah.
I have, but we, you know, if something is, you know, if I can't figure it out, you know, we might send it to, you know, someone that knows about, you know,
Yeah,
electrical, you know, maintenance,
right. Which
which
is a,
is like hard to find that person, you
yeah,
know.
I mean, that's sort of the unfortunate, like hard limit on how long we're going to be able to transfer video, is that there's not that many people out there who understand the precise engineering of these machines who are still around. And once they're gone, like that's going to kind of be it. So I don't know, kind of a grim note to end that on. But we're in the interest of having time for questions at the end. Why don't we cycle into your next video, Nilsson, which where we will get to see the actual digitizing process. Essentially, what we do, and you explain this a little bit, but you know, we take a deck like the one that we saw in our last video. We hook it up to some devices, you know, ending in a computer, and you play the tape, and you have to play it in real time, and you turn it into a digital file. And Nilsson explains the process of how, and demonstrates it in the next video, which we should roll right now. Let her rip.
So we've cleaned our decks, we've prepared our tapes. Now we can preview our transfer before we actually make one. For analog to digital transfers, we use VRecord, which is an open source command line tool. That's what we're looking at right now. Before we get into that, I just want to show you really quick something, you know, sort of like explain the video signal path. So we've got our, that's a little confusing. So try to orient ourselves here. We have a sync generator at the top here that's going to everything. It's going to the VTR, the playback deck. So in this instance, we're using the 3/4 inch Sony deck. So the signal from there travels to both a preview monitor and a waveform monitor. That's a analog signal. And then the signal is also going to the time-base corrector. We have a Leech DPS475, and what happens there is the analog signal becomes an SDI signal, and that SDI signal then passes to our Blackmagic capture card. We have the Ultra Studio HD Mini, which I quite like, and then the Blackmagic capture card is going to send that signal to my desktop Mac, and it's going to be captured through VRecord. And I also have on this chart what happens afterward, which we'll talk about afterward, but that's just NAS Synology storage and then also LTO storage. So let's close that and back into VRecord. I have a tape queued up. I'm just going to hit play. Might be able to hear that. So this is a tape from the VSW collection from a series called the 90s Channel, which some folks in here might be familiar with. I don't have the sound on right now. Also, VRecord, I'm recording this in OBS, and VRecord and OBS do not get along, at least on my computer, so it kept shutting down, so hopefully it doesn't shut down right now as I'm making this recording. So some things about VRecord. VRecord is really nice because it allows us to not only preview the digital video, it also allows us to monitor in the bottom left here, the waveform, and in the bottom right, the color vector scope of the digitized signal. In the top right corner, we can also see when and where the signal might be outside of broadcast range, indicated by the color yellow in the window. You can kind of see there's a few, the paper on the desk is yellow. There's some stuff on the keyboard seems yellow. Her shirt's kind of yellow. And so that's letting me know that it's outside of broadcast range. You can also see that in the waveform monitor. If the waveform goes above where it says 235 there, then we're going to know that that's outside of that. With the time-based corrector, I'm able to change the luma, the black levels, the chroma levels, as well as the hue of the video in real time if necessary. When I'm digitizing, I'm always watching both the preview monitor and the waveform monitor, which is showing me the original pre-digitized signal, which will allow me to ensure that my capture is as accurate as possible. And it looks like in OBS, the frame rate of OBS seems a little slowed down. What it looks like in VRecord does not actually look like that. It's playing at the correct frame rate. It's just in my recording right now in OBS. But I can demonstrate the time-based corrector. So for instance, I can change my luma levels to be very low. You can see it's getting a little darker, and the waveform is getting a little shorter. It's getting darker and darker. Obviously, we don't want that. But you might have to make a minute adjustment to make sure that you're getting the capture that you want. Same with the black. I can turn the black way down. You can see it's getting darker. I can also turn the black way up. And it's going to push that bottom line in the waveform monitor further up. So you can see that the picture is becoming a little washed out. Turn that back down. Chroma. You can watch the color vector scope. And there's not a ton of color in this video. It's already sort of a washed out video. Oh, now it's black. There you go. So you can see that the color is becoming more dramatic, which we don't want. So I'm going to turn that back down. Actually, fast forward a little bit. See if we can find something that has sort of an easier color to understand. Great. So actually, the hue of this original video is a little, it's not quite natural, and also the video is a little overexposed. So I might make a small adjustment here to just make sure that we're staying within broadcast range and getting as much information as possible. If your lights are too high or your darks are too low, you'll be losing visual information. With VRecord, I'm able to make captures that are 10-bit uncompressed video. We use the Matroska MKV format with an FFV1 video codec, if you're interested. And then when I'm done making my capture, I can hit escape, which will close the preview window and end the capture. And it will give me my MKV file, and it will also give me some logs about the capture, about my VRecord settings, as well as a frame MD5 checksum file.
All right. That's how the sausage is made, folks. Once again, a process I'm very familiar with there. So, all right, we've got about 15 minutes. Let's talk very quickly, and then we'll open it up for questions here in just a little bit. So you've created your file with that, Nilsson, and then we're done, right? We don't have to worry about anything. We've just the problem solves. You know, we've preserved our video, right? What do you do after that, if anything?
So just for instance, tapes from the VSW collection, they're going to end up in a couple different places. One is onto our Synology NAS RAID array.
And what is that for those who may not?
So right here, it's a bay of 8 spinning hard drives that work together to ensure that my data is safe. It has some redundancy. So if, for instance, one of the drives, spinning drives, like they don't last forever.
Yeah.
And so sort of one by one, they'll start to fail. And so the Synology is really great. It has a lot of software that warns me like way ahead of time if and when one of the drives is going to die, so that I can take it out and I can replace it. And then it will do the work for me of sort of repopulating it with my data. So my master preservation files go to there. They also go onto an LTO tape. So we're actually putting it back onto tape, right, which is sort of funny. But it's new tape, so it's might be a little better. So this is an LTO tape. We use LTO 8 here. Behind my computer, I actually have it's like a big sort of a big black machine that reads and writes these tapes, and so they hold about, I think, 12 terabytes of data. So they're quite effective at holding large amounts of data.
Right.
They take a long time to write, so I usually pop a tape in. I'll have a selection of master files that I've made, and then I'll usually let it run over the weekend or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll run for like 72 hours
Oh,
to
man.
transfer several terabytes of information. And
Right.
so the master files are stored on LTO, and they're also stored on the Synology. So
Okay.
better than just having, one copy of it.
Yes, yes, that's my favorite acronym in a field that's filled with acronyms. LOCKS is of course everybody's favorite because that stands for lots of copies keep stuff safe, and that's essentially what a lot of the file management is, for us as well. We put them on drives, you back up the drive, you put one in the cloud as a backup to the backup essentially, and then also another thing that you mentioned a little bit very briefly in your discussion of digitizing is checksums, which for those of you, some of you probably know what this is, but many of you may not. A checksum is essentially it's something that you run on a file. It could be any file. In our case, it would be video files that spits out a string of letters and numbers of what, I don't know, 28 or 24 or however many long it is, that is unique to that file. And so every time you make a copy of that file, you run that program on it, you generate, that number, and it has to be exactly the same. And that's how you know that your file is authentic. I mean, that's how you can relate the file to the tape to make sure that you have that what you have is what you think it is and what it says it is, and that it's transferred successfully. And you have to run those, every so often to make sure something hasn't gone wrong with your drive, something weird hasn't happened to the file. Essentially, I would say that it's when you have the file and then you have to manage it, you have to shepherd it. That's kind of when the real work really begins. And it's unfortunate that it's not quite as photogenic as fixing decks and inspecting tapes and even the transfer process, because it's mostly just a lot of staring at computer screens. But it has to be done. I mean, that's if we're intending for this material to be, like I said in the beginning of my video, all you need to do for a film print is essentially keep it in a place that's cool and dry and just check it out every once in a while. But like now that you have a digital copy, it has to be managed forever. I mean, literally forever, into the future, in order to make any of our work worth it.
Yeah, they say that the LTO tapes are good. They're good for 30 years. That's sort of the LTO promise.
Yeah.
Digital, spinning hard drives, they're not going to last forever. I've used ones that are like 30 years old and they still work. Sometimes you'll use one for like 2 years and it'll stop working.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of factors that you might not be able to control. So
yeah.
Dan and Nelson, I want to interrupt just real quickly because I think this would be something important to cover that a lot of people have been talking about in the chat. Oh, I guess I should also introduce myself. Dan, you described yourself as the senior archivist, so I guess that makes me the junior archivist at MediaBurn. Sorry, you can't see me right now. My name is Max Hart, but there's been a lot of very generative conversation in the chat about the file format of these digitized tapes that we have not touched on so much yet. One person, I believe Ron, asked about up-resing files to 4K, although there are many different questions around that. I responded as I often work with filmmakers at MediaBurn. We're obviously working in high definition formats and will often request a master file in that resolution, which I will give to filmmakers, but that we in-house don't keep high definition masters. We keep standard definition masters. And I think it could be great to explain the difference between why the standard definition master is a better archival master file than the ability to create up-res videos, which we of course can. But for the bedrock master, the level 0 master, we keep it standard definition. Why do we do that?
Well, we do it because doing something like that for display purposes, I think, is fine. But I mean, that's the signal and the picture and the sound as we received it and as it was created. And I think just sort of philosophically, that's what in an archival sense, in the sense of preserving that original signal and what it was like, I think that is the most responsible way to reproduce that authentic object. And that is we work accordingly from that. Nilsson, I assume is what you guys do as well?
Yeah, exactly. I get a lot of questions from, people that want tapes digitized and like, oh, can I have like a 4K version of this?
Yeah.
And like, sure you can. But for the preservation master, it's not necessarily, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's not like up-res just because we can. Like the preservation master is close to what it is, what the original is.
Yeah. I mean, it was an image shot, created with certain technology at a certain time, and it had certain, a very hard limit on what it could give you in terms of resolution, but that's what the object was, and that's what it remains, and that's what I think it should remain. But this is good, Max. I'm glad you broke in, because we're getting close to 7 o'clock, and there are lots of questions, and we want to hear them. Somebody is raising their hand. Jed is raising your hand. If you want to unmute yourself, Jeff, and ask your question, now is the time to do it, please.
Oh, hi, thank you. We're filmmakers who've been doing this a long time. I started out in half-inch reel-to-reel with my first documentary on PBS, and 75. And I'm wondering, I have both a half-inch, and then we've gone through the whole process. I have half-inch, 3/4-inch masters, beta, the whole range of 1-inch. And so I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with those in terms of an archive and how they can be preserved. A lot of the material I did was like 4 nationally broadcast documentaries on American Indian subjects. Ishi the Last Yahi was the most famous. Who Owns the Past? So I interviewed and have original interviews with like 30 different tribes, elders, like some of the most important elders who passed now. And I want to be able to get this material and preserve it, and then also offer it to Native communities where I shot that, and be able to give them back a record of that, either digitally or some other form. So I didn't know whether this was something that you guys, if we talk later on, whether I should contact y'all and see if there's any ways that it might be mutually workable.
Yeah, you should. We should talk later. You should get in touch. You can write to. Well, why don't you write? You have the MediaBurn contact info, correct? Why don't you send us an email, and
Okay.
we can talk more about that.
Okay. I just wasn't sure whether that was part of what y'all do. We have our own archive of material that we've shot, and more recently, and we have 400 videos on our website that we have links to, hashtags, and all that, putting those up on video. So, and we're looking at doing that with other filmmakers who we've worked with, who are asking us to also do that if we can find a way to make it financially workable.
Yeah. Get in touch. I'm at dan@mediaburn.org.
Okay.
Yeah, send me an email and we'll talk.
Okay, thank you. Good. It's a good workshop. Thank you for doing it.
Great. Wow, glad to. Anyway, who else is out there? Unmute yourself. Let it flow forth.
Hey, Dan, it's Peter Kuttner.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I want to ask Jed a particular question. As I understand the history of the format of what MediaBurn is calling guerrilla television, that one of the things that put it in the outliers and the outlaws of filmmakers was that I thought that the FCC did not consider half-inch up to its standards, and so it couldn't be broadcast. How did you handle getting your material on PBS as early as 1975?
Well, real quickly. Well, okay, we cut it. We cut the film with 650 deck. We cut the film on the 8650. We brought the 8650 deck and the finished we did it just like PBS modes, 5646. We brought the hour, it was an hour master tape versus, you'd put everything edited onto the hour tape, not the little small ones. And anyway, we took the deck over to the ABC station in Dallas, and we had them run it through a time-based corrector, and they had a $250,000 character generator, and so they put all our titles on. And so they gave me, and it ran time-based corrector, everything. They then gave me a 2-inch master, which I walked over to the PBS station in Dallas and put it on their desk, KRA, and I said, would you look at this and consider broadcasting it? And they looked at it, and it was about redlining in Dallas, called Promise and Practice on Redlining and Housing. And they said, oh yeah, we'll air it. And they said, oh, nice. Thanks for transferring your 16 millimeter to 2-inch master.
Great story. Thank you very much.
A word about it being 1/2 inch.
That's one way to do it. Anybody else have any questions? Like I'm looking through the chat, and I'm sorry.
Hi, can you?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Nelson Becker here from Nelson, British Columbia, Canada. I'm working with our local archive here to digitize about 600 tapes that are in various formats, including from reel to reel right up to VHS. I'm using OBS as a VHS deck that has built-in time base in it. OBS allows me to control frame rate. And it's not really clear to me whether I should use 29 point da-da-da or 59 point da-da-da for VHS tapes. Do you have a recommendation for me?
Nelson,
Did you hear?
That's a good question. How has OBS been treating you is it running okay? Are you noticing like it doesn't like lose frames just from like while you're sending it the signal?
No.
That's great.
No,
Yeah.
and it records in MKV and remuxes to MP4. I save both versions. The challenge that I have has to do with interlace versus deinterlace, and
does it record interlaced? Does that give you an option?
Yeah, it gives me a big option. It gives me, I think, 15 different choices for deinterlacing or for interlacing.
That's nice. It's so, yeah, a note about that. Often when you're playing back a digital file, for instance, in VLC, it'll sort of automatically deinterlace it for you.
Right.
So it'll look nice. It'll still be the file that you want it to be, but then it'll also be nice if you're playing it back like on your computer. So
yeah, we're using YouTube as a distribution media, and the other thing that OBS has audio filters in it, and so some of the tapes that were made pre-97 were made for a community TV channel here. And the people who created that were volunteers and not necessarily, they did not know how to do a proper recording. So some of the tapes are very noisy, or they didn't bother to hook sound for live music. They didn't bother to actually get a feed from the mixer. Yeah. They were using the camera mic. Yeah. But the material on the tape is so valuable, it's so important that I'll put up with it, to get it out there. And this whole thing is kind of a learning experience for me. I used to I worked a lot in video in reel-to-reel days and in U-matic days in Vancouver and in New York. So I have hands-on experience with a lot of that equipment. It's very difficult to find equipment these days that is reliable and that works. And fortunately, I'm okay with a screwdriver and a hammer. But
What do you need the hammer for?
my head.
Yeah. Very quickly, we have one. I'm sorry to cut
I'm going
you
to
off.
let you go. No, that's all right. I didn't get an answer, but that's okay.
Oh, we'll get in touch. We'll talk to you later. We have one last question real quick, and then we're going to have to.
No problem.
Yeah, hit the gong here.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. HWP. Hello. All right. Well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, really quick. What about recycling the audio and video tapes? I have so many. I started in public access running a channel years ago. We've digitized a lot of it. I've asked recyclers in the San Diego area. They don't, I mean, it seems bad to just throw them away. Is there any resource?
No.
To Congress? What do you know about this around this?
Yeah, so I just because to let everyone know, it probably got lost in the frenzy, but I did reply also on chat to this question. The unfortunate answer is that it's going to vary state by state and city by city. And I don't know of, but my hunch is that there's absolutely no efforts being put whatsoever into recycling the material. The thing you're probably going to find is more something like specialized disposal. For instance, I think this is true, although Dan or even Sarah, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's actually technically illegal to dispose of magnetic tape just in the normal trash or recycling in Chicago. We may or may not actually do that. But I think we've looked multiple times into kinds of like specialized disposal and have simply concluded that there is no service for it. So you're kind of stuck with the inability to dispose of it normally and also no other way. So unfortunately, the answer to your question is you're going to have to go through just the specific city that you're in.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I really appreciate you doing this and bringing us all together, having working for years. And one quick for Jed, I want to say, this material for the Native Americans should not be lost. You really need to deal with the Smithsonian. It can be tedious, but the Museum of the American Indian or the Museum of Natural History has Native American archives, and the Museum of American History. And I think they'd be best. Yes, the Library of Congress, some of them could be lost in holes, but they might acquire it from you. There's some donor money based on the tribes, and I just want to encourage you to not just let this, kind of go by the wayside, because I think it's really important, and if you can deal with those institutions, if you want to deal with the bureaucracy, but I think it's worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks. On that note, yes, I think we should end on a note of strong advocacy for this exact type of material that we're trying to save. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. I'm afraid our time is past up. Thank you all for coming to this event. I hope it was interesting and informative. And for those of you with further questions that we didn't get to tonight, please do not hesitate to email either of us. My email it's very simple. It's dan@mediaburn.org. And please go ahead and let me hear it if I didn't get to your question. And Nilsson, if you would like to give out the same.
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat. So yeah, absolutely feel free to contact me.
All right. Thank you for your attention and for your excellent questions. And thank you, Nilsson, for providing your view on this process.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dan. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Good night, everyone. We'll hopefully come back for again our next session on the 26th of October. Thank you all very much.